going to start recording. There we go. All right, we got everything. So when recordings become available, which is usually about an hour or so after the lecture, could be a little sooner if the lecture's short, could be a little longer if the system's busy, whatever. You can come over here to this hamburger menu, right? You guys are familiar with the concept of the hamburger menu? Yeah, the hamburger menu down there has a recording option, and they will eventually be there. Now, the default settings for recordings, if you look, it will be recent recordings, right? No recordings found within the past 30 days. If you want to see older recordings at some point, you can hit this drop-down menu and select all recordings from a range, right? So the recordings don't go away, but they're just like, well, if you haven't watched it in a month, it's probably, yeah. So they're going to show it. You have to ask for it is all. Okay, so that's where the recordings are. So hopefully, nobody asks me, hey, where are the recordings? Because, okay. Now, we got a couple things to talk about before the syllabus. So, important thing. What have you all heard about IDS 200? Because I know people hear stuff. It's hard. Anybody else? It's hard. Anybody else? We got two. That seems to be a pretty consistent, yeah, I will accept that. Well, many students find it hard. Not all. Some people kind of breeze through it. So let me talk about what it is first, and then we will talk about some other related stuff. Okay. So what the course is, and I need a little history for this, circa 2015, the government asked me to redesign the existing IDS 200 course, which was a standard 30 topics in 15 weeks kind of course that covered all the important topics, but was widely perceived as boring. So they said, you know what, come on, do something more interesting than this. And I said, yeah, okay. So what I decided to do, after some thought, I covered, this course covers a lot of the same ground, because IT is IT, regardless of the context where you teach it, a lot of the same ground, but it's about how big online firms like Facebook, Amazon, Google, and YouTube have unique data problems and thus unique solutions, right? So, for example, one of Facebook's big data problems that is not faced much by these others is managing a continuous inflow of millions and millions of photos every day and providing storage for them and making a system where those photos can be very quickly and easily retrieved when they're constructing the feed for people using Facebook. That's a lot different from what Google has. Google has to manage literally trillions of web pages and figure out which web pages should show up in which searches and what the priority should be, how they should be ranked relative to each other, and be able to respond to those kind of user search queries within a fraction of a second. Amazon has different problems. Amazon is a big online retailer. Their big thing is they have to manage potentially hundreds of transactions per second, where each of, if you've ever tried to search a file on your computer and the wheels spin around for a few minutes, you can imagine that Amazon's system, which is very big and interfaces not just with their own internal operations, but with external partners as well, getting all that stuff going at speed is, again, a big challenge. Okay, so they all have their different unique problems. Like I said, we'll cover a lot of the same ground, but hopefully, since we're starting with something where you have some familiarity with it, I mean, everybody's probably used Facebook, used Google, etc., bought something on Amazon, right? So you have some idea of what's going on there, and then we'll take a little peek behind the curtain of how they do stuff. Okay, so that's the idea for the course. And again, I hope you enjoy it, and if you don't, I apologize. That's life. Nobody enjoy it. You can never design a course that's going to make everybody happy. So there's that. Now, as far as the difficulty of the course, not lie, the exams are difficult. Okay, but the reason is this. Suppose the typical cutoff for a B is about 740 or 750 out of 1,000 points for the semester. Okay, so exams are 600 points, and suppose you only average 60% on those. 60% is 360 points. Okay, the lab stuff is kind of easy to get all the points on. Really, honestly, a lot of it is just showing up. The rest of it is, making sure you don't make terrible mistakes. There's no reason why anybody should ever get less than, say, 240 points on lab if they're actually showing up and trying. Okay, so out of 300 lab points, 80% is 240 points, right? So already there we got 600 points total. Now, the last bit, pack back, there is no reason why anyone ever should get less than 130 out of 100 points. You read that correctly on packback, right? Because this is something you can manage at your own pace within reason, and there's plenty of time to do it. There's slack built into the system. Everybody who's trying to can get 130 points there, right? So add all those together, total 730 points, right? Just below the typical likely B cutoff. Okay, now every semester is different. The curve, it fluctuates, whatever. But what I'm saying, packback, you can get more than 100%, and everybody ought to be able to. Further details in week 2. Homework assignments, lab attendance, lab exercises, students tend to do well on that. And again, if you're trying, there's no reason why you shouldn't, right? The exams are difficult because why? These two things, lab, homework, packback, that tests, are you showing up and doing what you're supposed to, right? But that's not a very high threshold for learning. The threshold for, doing very well in the course is understanding the material well enough to do well on the exams, like 80% or higher, and do well there. And that'll probably get you to an A. Okay, but you can do so-so on the exams and very much still get a B. So all the people who say, oh, I got a D or I failed or the course is hard, well, yeah, I'm not going to say the course isn't hard, but the people who get anything below a C, it's because they're, they had other priorities. I'm going to be kind and say they had other priorities. Okay? So, to that end, I'm going to bring up this. This is what I was popping in here. This is an Excel file I call Impact of Remote Learning Habits. And I guess I got to open it. So this isn't from IDS 200. This is from a graduate level web analytics course I teach. And these are the final exam grades going back a few years. Now, I've been teaching this course since 2013. And for several years, the final exam grades were pretty stable with an average between 80-85%, varying on different factors, whatever, but, in that range pretty consistently. Now, fall 19, we're still there. Spring 2020, as it happened, the final exam happened the week before quarantine started, so that was unaffected by COVID. The next semester, course is substantially the same, right, except for some minor tweaks to topics covered, not covered, things that get outdated, whatever. Substantially the same course, the exam grades actually drop. And this is crazy because it was the same final exam pretty much, just with open book. And so I'm thinking, well, okay, a bunch of students thought, well, I don't need to really know anything. I'll just show up and I'll have my book open and I'll look up everything. But trust me, even though the exams are multiple choice, the process that is built in there, for assessing understanding and making it hard to cheat and all that stuff also makes it hard for students to just look up the answers. So I think, the grades went down a little bit, but one semester isn't really a pattern. But when we see over time, this is what happened until the fairly catastrophic last fall when we had a final exam average for graduate students, right, who are like smart and stuff, average below 60%. Well, the key takeaway from this whole stretch here, the course had been remote. And I'm not saying remote learning doesn't work, but there's a small subset of students for whom remote learning works well. Most of the time, if it's remote learning, students, they got the lecture on, but they're kind of zoned out. They're walking in and out of the room. They're making popcorn. They're watching other shit on YouTube. They're playing Fortnite while the lecture's going on. I don't know. I can't track that stuff, right? I'm just trying to do a lecture. But what I'm saying, if people aren't there and they aren't paying attention, it is what it is. Same thing for this course, right? I don't track attendance. I strongly encourage it. I'm going to tell you the people who show up, day after day and listen to the lectures and come prepared and all that tend to do substantially better than the people who don't. But I also know this is IDS 200. Not everybody really, cares too much about their grade. Some people are happy with a C. Some people may decide that with all the other shit they got going on in their life that, this is a trade they're going to make. They say, well, yeah, I'm just going to stay home and all right, I'll get a C or whatever in the course, but I'll pass and move on. Okay. But, again, in that case, don't come back and say, the course was too hard. All right. Because again, this pattern right here really tells it all. All right. Now for IDS 200 undergrads, we're starting to get back to where we were last semester on 2 of the 4 tests. Because again, this course, this is why I bring it up. I've been doing it since first semester I taught it was 2016. Why I'm bringing that up is I've been doing this for a while with substantially the same course, and I know what the averages should be on the exams, right? And they've been, again, pretty low during this whole COVID window, and it's coming back to normal. 2 out of the 4 exams this last time around, the course, the classes did comparably to the long run average, couple not so much. So I guess, we'll see what happens. And yeah, so I wish you all well, but people are going to do what they're going to do. I'm not going to understate the difficulty of the course, but I'll toss in one more thing. All right. So why is the course difficult? Well, there's no math, right? A lot of people find computations or quickly doing computations quickly. That's redundant. Find doing math quickly to be difficult, right? But there's no math. Likewise, there's no process. You guys know if you've taken an accounting class and you're like, oh, here's some, transaction or some update to the system, to the double entry bookkeeping. Here's something I got to update, right? Or I'm doing finance. I'm doing the CAPM model for like the expected return on investments, and I know what the formula is. I know what the process. I learn it, right? This is not like that either. What this is, there's a bunch of information and you have to organize it in your own brains so that it all kind of makes sense and you can apply it. All right. This is the sort of course, if students are not prepared for that, that's very difficult, right? So it's not a terms and definitions kind of course. I mean, I'm sure you've all had courses where, there'd be, read 3 chapters, and then in 2 weeks there's an exam, and you're like, well, fuck it, I'll just look at the glossary the morning of the exam, and I'll know the terms and definitions, and I'll do well enough, right? But what's the point? What's the point about that? See, in a few years, you're all going to be like business professionals and out there doing interviews, and somebody's going to ask you, oh, I see you graduated from UIC. Oh, let's look. You took IDS 200. Was that with Lundquist? And you'll be like, yeah. And you're like, I took it with Lundquist 5 years ago or 10 years ago. How's he doing? And you're like, he got old and fat. And like, yeah, that sounds about right. And so IDS 200, is he still teaching about Google Ads in there? And you'll be like, yeah, we learned about Google Ads. He's like, well, tell me what you know about Google Ads. And if your answer is, Google runs ads and they make money, that's not going to be a very impressive answer, right? But if your answer is, oh yeah, we learned all about that, and they got one system for Google itself and its close partner sites like YouTube and some others, and they got another system called AdSense for people who are running blogs, and Google doesn't entirely trust them because they know that bloggers might click on their own ads to get pizza money, and dude would be like, wow, look at you, you know some stuff, right? And you'll have a thumbs up on that part of the interview. Now I get it, not everybody's going to be an IDS major, right? Not everybody's going to hear questions like that on the interview. But having that kind of approach to learning in the long run will be very good for whatever domain you end up in. Okay, so that's why the thing is like that. It's a bit of a transition, maybe, whatever, but that's what I'm trying to do. Okay? Okay. All right. So let's get into the syllabus because that's the thing I absolutely got to cover today. Any questions, concerns, anything? So it has come to my attention over the last few years that many students are somewhat terrified of raising their hand and speaking in class, especially if it's to ask about something, that they kind of didn't get, or they feel awkward asking about. So I try to ask, instead of saying, does anyone have any questions or stuff? I try to ask, would anyone like to know more? Because, that gives people an opportunity to ask some questions without necessarily having to say, yeah, I didn't get it. So I'm going to try to do that. I don't always remember. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to grab the syllabus here. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so we meet now, we meet here. The rest of this stuff I'm going to fill out over the next week or two. We have all of our TAs assigned to the course, but we haven't allocated them to lab sections yet, given them office hours. I'm going to figure out some office hours for myself. This semester, fortunately for you all, I'm on campus 5 days a week, so that gives me some more flexibility. Although, I'm not going to have like 20 hours of office hours, but yeah, so I'll be around. We'll get the teaching assistants. We'll get the syllabus updated. Okay, so first stuff, general information, right? This course is about the stuff we look at 4 big online companies, how they do business, the data problems they have, how they set up systems to deal with that. There's a course schedule in the back. If you scan all the way to there, and I'll mention, when it says the topic here, doesn't mean we're going to cover that whole topic in that week. That means when we're going to start covering that topic. So, for example, this week 4 here, we have an exam. The exam's going to be on Friday. There's going to be a review session the Wednesday before. Access and security will start the week before, and we'll finish it up on Monday that week. Okay, so it's not perfect one-to-one correspondence. This lecture topic appears in this box. It just means that's when we're expecting to start. And the lectures, again, will be recorded, posted to Blackboard, and then they will also eventually be posted to YouTube, right? It's not my top priority to get things on YouTube because, again, they should be there in Blackboard anyway. But I know for some people, YouTube is more convenient, so I'll have them there as well. Okay. Now, fortunately, you don't. Oh, let me also mention. Take a look at that email there. That's a student email. That's because I resumed my academic life, 2002, came back after a long gap and, started back as a bachelor's degree guy, finished that up, rolled into a PhD program here, and rolled into a faculty position. And every time I, changed spots, I said, hey, can I get a cooler, net ID? And they said no. And I said, all right. So anyway, yeah, I still have my student net ID, but I assure you, I'm a grown up and stuff. All right, yeah. Anyway, so course materials. So we don't have any textbooks. That's why I brought this. So the good thing is there's no money shelled out for that. I remember it was close to 20 years ago. I had one semester that was really brutal. It was like $800 in textbook costs. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to inflict that on people. So there's no textbook. Everything you need is, in the slides, online, whatever. We'll cover it in lecture. So there's that. There's also some software which is freely available. So we'll do some stuff in Microsoft Office in the lab. I'll talk more about the labs in week 2. It's all, Microsoft Office is there in the labs. If you want to do stuff at home, of course, there's mechanisms for that. You can download a free copy of Microsoft Office through the UIC web store. I'll have instructions on that as well. And for some web design that we'll do towards the end of the course, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can use an online web editor, right? There's any number of them out there, or you can just, create plain text files and save them in some sort of web file format, and they'll work that way too. All right, so all that stuff's free. The only thing you got to pay for in the course is this thing called Packback that I mentioned. So Packback is a platform for online discussions. Basically, students can post questions, students can answer other questions. There's a system that evaluates basically how good the questions and answers are, and you can get credit for that as long as you meet that threshold. So last I checked, the cost for doing Packback was $29. Yeah. So it's there. The good news about Packback is that it's a fairly easy source of points. And some students do find the discussions to be interesting, right? There's not a lot of structure on that. It's basically, as long as it's something within one of the topics that we're covering at the time, that's great. Go for it. Okay. So, and we'll talk more about that during week 2 as well. All right. We use Blackboard. Has anybody here not used Blackboard before? That's good. Okay. So yeah, if big announcements happen, they get announced through Blackboard. Now, all the time I get students who, if they had only read the announcements, they wouldn't have had to do some back and forth email nonsense with me. Like I get students around week 12 saying, oh, I didn't know Packback was supposed to be this way. And I was like, I don't know how you missed all those announcements. So there aren't a lot of announcements. I'm not trying to flood people's mailboxes with stuff, but every now and then, like check once during the week and see if there's stuff. You should make that part of your whatever, maybe on Monday, Friday, whatever. Make sure you didn't miss anything. Okay. There's not a lot of announcements, but because there aren't a lot of announcements, the ones that happen are probably important. Okay. Number 2, email communication. Right. So UIC is mostly a research university, in case you didn't know, and that means the main model for being a professor here is that you teach one course a semester that occupies something like 10 hours out of your week, and the other 30 to 90 hours a week you work is basically research type stuff. I'm the opposite. I mean, I went through the research thing and did it for a while, got some papers published, so yay me. But, I decided, I don't really want to do that. I'd rather teach. And so here I am. So I have a whole bunch of courses that I teach. I basically don't do any research at all, although I did publish a paper last year when I was going up for promotion. I wanted to have that, Anyway, so the point of all this, I have a bunch of different courses, right? This semester I have 2 big sections of IDS 200. I got a couple other courses. Some semesters I've had as many as 5 or 6 courses. Anyway, if you're emailing me, please mention the course in your subject line, and better yet, the course and the section, because you may ask me something, hey, when is the homework due, or what's going to be on the exam, and I'll write back and say, oh, depends, what course are you taking? So don't do that, right? Just let me know which course you're in, and then we'll all save each other's time. Okay. I usually respond to emails quickly, certainly within 48 hours. If you don't hear back from me within 72 hours, then yeah, your email probably got lost in the shuffle, because again, typical semester, I have 400 to 600 students. That's closer to 400 this semester. 400 to 600 students. And yeah, sometimes I get a lot of email and, stuff happens. But what else can I say? I guess that's pretty much it, right? I sometimes get a lot of email. I try to keep up with it though. Okay, but common sense applies, right? Most of the assignments are going to do Friday nights at midnight. So don't wait till like 10 or 11 p.m. Friday to ask me some kind of question about something, because, 10 p.m. Friday, I am definitely not checking my work email, right? Common sense applies. Okay. All right. Attendance. Yeah, I'll be here. I don't track your attendance. There's too many of you, and it's a waste of time. As always, I figure you're more or less fully functional adults. If you want to be here, great. I hope it'll help you do well in the course and learn some stuff. If you don't want to be here, right, that's your call, right? Do what you got to do. There will be recordings available. Yeah. Lab sessions, however, lab sessions are different. Reason why, the IDS department has a generous allocation of funding for all of its TAs. The reason why we have a generous allocation there is because our TAs teach things that are in principle useful to all business majors, right? The big one being Excel. We teach that in a couple different courses, labs, this one and then IDS 355. So because of that, what we really don't want is some other department trying to poach some of those TAs by saying, oh, look, we had a student here. They didn't know something about Excel. And the IDS people, they're not teaching them what they ought to know. And so we should get those TAs, right? So therefore, we have a fairly strict policy of having butts in seats as far as the lab sessions, right? Physical attendance is required. Even if you turn in the lab exercise on time, because every lab session has an associated lab exercise, if you don't attend the session in person, you're going to get at most 2 out of 6 points for the lab exercise. We take that whole lab attendance thing very seriously. Now, if something comes up, right, it is possible that you may have a reasonable excused absence, right? Like suppose you got a court date, or, you know, you get in a car wreck and you got a medical emergency, whatever. Fine, we can work around that. But if you know you have something come up that, you know, you just want to do something, right, then yeah, you should make arrangements to attend a different session. Okay, there will be a mechanism for that as well. Okay, the other thing, even though attendance for lectures isn't tracked, I got 400 students. I can't be dealing with a lot of nonsense around makeup exams, right? For fairly obvious reasons. So, yeah, so first thing, just show up for the exam on time, you know, be there for it. Yeah. If not, well, there's two kinds of excuses, valid, not valid, right? So in general, a valid excuse is something big, significant that you didn't schedule, right? So if you got court dates, jury duty, National Guard obligations, UIC athletics, you're a keynote speaker at some conference on some topic where you're an expert, whatever, yeah, okay, that's fine, right? But if it's something like, oh, I scheduled a day to get my nails done, no, not that, okay? So, yeah, I did have a student say, oh, I scheduled, you know, I was going to the dentist to get my teeth cleaned, and I was like, you reschedule that. Anyway, okay, so I hope we all understand that. You know, I probably, even though, you know, in theory, I could like impose penalties and stuff, unless I become aggravated with a large number of makeups. You know, if it's just a few people each exam, yeah, probably let it go. But man, there was one semester, last semester, one exam, I had like 20 makeups and it was ridiculous. And I became unpleasant. So let's not get to that point. Okay, last thing, students with disabilities. If you have a documented physical or learning disability, please contact our Disability Resource Center. They can set you up with reasonable accommodations, things like extra time or quiet rooms, stuff like that. Okay, if you do have an accommodation with the DRC, please send me a copy of your letter of accommodation as soon as you can so I can be aware of it. Okay? All right. Any questions about any of that stuff? That basic syllabus stuff. Nothing? All right. Grading. Well, I briefly covered the grading. So lab, 300 points, back, 100 points, but you can get extra credit. And exams, 4 exams with a total of 600 points. Course total is 1,000. Now, officially, there's a 10-point scale. In practice, there's a curve, and the cutoffs tend to be around 86 to 88% for an A, something around 75% for a B, something like 64% for a C. And the basic structure of that, with 64%, you can get that by basically doing the stuff you're supposed to do, right? Basically showing up for doing the homeworks reasonably well on those, doing back, showing up for exams. Even if you do terrible, you ought to be able to get 64% for the course. So 64%, the C level basically says you're in there, you're trying, you're kind of doing what you're supposed to do. Maybe not great, but you're doing what you're supposed to do. A B is a little tougher. You're maybe not like have really clear knowledge on all the stuff, but you're doing what you're supposed to, and you're doing okay on the exams. I mean, I get that the exams are difficult, and there's reasons why, but you know, you're doing okay. You could be doing better, but you're doing okay. Fine, get a B. Something like we talked about, 60% or a little higher, depending on how you're doing on the other stuff. Maybe even a little lower if you're doing well on the labs and homework stuff. And then an A, you pretty much have to know the material well, because even though the exams are multiple choice, again, word gets out, they are challenging multiple choice, right? Many of the multiple choice questions will simultaneously assess your knowledge of different factors. So it's not like match this term to this definition. It's a little bit more involved than that. Okay, so trust me when I say, yeah, it's multiple choice, and yeah, it's not easy. But if you understand the material well, you will do well on the exams and you'll get the A. All right. So I always have, students want to stop by and see their exams afterwards. And it'll be stuff like, well, the exams were really hard, but then we're going through them. And it's like they still miss some basic terms and definitions questions, right? So, like Amazon, for example, has their SC. I'm grabbing for the right word to describe it. Their S3 system, which is a system for large-scale storage and doing analytics, so businesses can upload giant slugs of data. Anyway, so there'd be a question on the exam about what is S3, and they won't get it. They'll put down like something like, it's a security tool. No, it isn't. So, yeah, I get it that some of the stuff is difficult, but you got to at least get the low-hanging fruit, like the terms and definitions questions that are there. Okay. Okay, so there'll be 4 exams. Exams will happen every 4 weeks. There's one in week 4, one in week 8, one in week 12, one in finals week. They're not really cumulative in the sense that, like, the first one is on the Facebook module. It's going to be all about different Facebook-y type stuff. The second one will be about Amazon. It's not going to go back and ask you detailed questions about what was in the Facebook module. What it is as far as cumulativeness, for example, one of the things we talk about throughout the course is something called a relational database. It's a particular database model. After the Facebook module, I should be able to ask something about a relational database in a question without having to give a detailed explanation of what a relational database is, because at that point you should know. Okay, so it's cumulative like that. There's a certain level of understanding that's expected, but there's not going to be, go back and do detailed stuff with the earlier topics. Okay. Homework assignments. The thing I'll mention about those, you can get a homework extension if you ask 2 days in advance. So if you ask at least 2 days in advance, 48 hours in advance, you get a 1-day extension. And this is because, I know sometimes people will put a lot of assignments on the same day, or sometimes people get called up for extra work, or you get, tickets to go see Blackpink or something, whatever. If you let me know you let your TA know 2 days in advance, because that's what you'll say. You don't need a good excuse. You don't need a bad excuse. You don't need any excuse. You just need to ask 48 hours in advance, right? And this keeps the TAs from having to go through and verify, let me see if your whole thing checks out, right? So I figure if you ask 2 days in advance, you're, managing your own life. Yeah, we'll give you an extra day to do stuff. Okay, does that make sense? All right, cool. Lab exercises. After the lab session, students are going to turn in the lab exercise. So you'll upload it to Blackboard. The expectation is that you'll be able to complete the lab exercise during lab. Not everybody does, and sometimes things happen. It's better now. We used to have a problem where TAs would show up and the student helper who was supposed to be in the lab wasn't there and wouldn't be there to let people in. But now the TAs all have their own personal access to the lab room, so that problem is solved. Of course, it still leaves open the possibility that your TA might be unavoidably detained. Yeah. Anyway, the expectation is that you'll submit the lab exercise at the end of the lab session, and then you can, go on with your life. If not, you have until the end of the day, right? So you can always go back to a lab or do it at home, whatever you need to do. Now, lab exercises, unlike homework assignments are graded in terms of correctness. Lab exercises, they're practice. We want to make sure, you learn the stuff, give you a chance to practice, whatever. And the TAs aren't going to go over the stuff with a fine-tooth comb, okay? The idea is if you make a good faith effort to complete the lab exercise, you do every part of it, even if there are some mistakes, you still get full credit, okay? So you don't need to panic about that. Obviously, if some part of the exercise calls for there to be some fairly detailed chart, whatever, in an Excel file, and instead of doing a chart, you just draw a picture of a happy face over it, you might lose some points for that, right? So like I said, if you have made a good faith effort to complete the exercise and done every part of it, you should get full credit, even if there's a mistake here or there, okay? Because it's practice. It's all right. So like I said here, lab exercises will be graded for completeness, not perfection, although grievously flawed work can result in deductions, right? So all you got to do for lab to get the full points, show up on time, stay there through the exercise, submit the exercise, boom, you should get, That's 6 points times 12 exercises. That's 72 points that there's no reason everybody shouldn't get, even though everybody doesn't get them all. Okay. Packback, I'll talk more about Packback next week. Packback will actually start in week 3. Okay. Questions on any of that stuff? Any concerns? Anyone would like more explanation? Yeah.
The labs don't start until week 3.
Correct. No lab sessions until week 3. Okay. Reason is students enroll in the class late. We only get the TAs like the day before the semester starts. It'd be too much of a rush to get all that set up and deal with it. And then you got people like, oh, I couldn't make it. How do I get credit for that? So yeah, we just week 3. Cool. Problem solved. All right. Anything else? Yeah.
How many questions is usually the
Oh, if I have a 75-minute session, which I don't, it would be 37 questions in 60 minutes or 65 minutes maybe. Since this is probably going to be about a 45-minute, it's a 50-minute session, but it takes time to hand out the exams. So about 45 minutes, it'll probably be like 30 questions in 45 minutes. Okay, so again, if you know the material well, it's manageable. There's never a time problem. People say, oh, I don't have enough time to do stuff. No, I mean, sometimes it's like time management in the exam that people spend too much time puzzling over one question, but mostly it's just a knowledge problem. Mostly it's just that, well, you didn't know the stuff and you could have sat in that chair all day trying to figure it out, but you just didn't know it. Okay? I mean, it is at the end of the exam, there's usually only a few people that are still, working on it. So yeah, there's enough time, I promise you, if you know the material. And if you don't know the material, well, time doesn't really matter. Okay. Anything else is good. We're on a streak. We got participation. Yeah.
It looked like there was a sign-up sheet at the beginning of the syllabus.
A sign-up sheet?
Yeah, like for lab sessions. Are those finalized? Or
No, that's not for students. That's for me to fill in with which TAs are teaching which labs.
Okay.
Yeah, and which office hours they have. So you guys are everybody should already be enrolled in a lab section. And I can't do much about that. Last I heard, they were all full. They were like literally all full. So you're kind of stuck until somebody drops if you want to switch. And hopefully nobody wants to switch. But if you did, you could probably also arrange a swap with somebody through an academic advisor if you wanted to. Just saying. All right, cool. Anything else? Yeah, so this stuff I'll get filled out. I'm meeting with the TAs like on Friday. On Friday, I'm going to set them loose to figure out who's got what sections and figure out their office hours. Then I'll post that. So two last things. Part 3, course administration. This is basically some fancy boilerplate that says don't cheat, okay, which is good advice. But here's the thing. It's not cheating if it's a homework assignment and you get together with your buddies and you say, well, let's work on this together. Or you tell somebody, hey, I got stuck on this part of it. How do you fix that? How do you get past that, right? That's not cheating. What is cheating is that if somebody says at like 10 o'clock at night on the day a homework is due, and they say, oh shit, I forgot we had homework due tonight. And they send out a note through Blackboard that says, hey, I forgot we had a homework. I'll give $20 to anybody who mails me a finished copy of the exam, finished copy of the homework. Now, one semester we had a student who did that, but instead of clicking all students in Blackboard, they clicked on all users, which includes students, TAs, and instructors with hilarious and catastrophic consequences. Okay, so what I'm saying, it's okay to seek help, all right? What's not okay is to present someone else's work as your own. So there's that. Obviously, for exams, cheating in exams, well, if we catch it, that'll be a 0 right there. Lately, we have not had much of that. I don't know if that means that students are more honest or if they've stopped caring too much about doing well on exams or some of both. I don't know. Or maybe we've just gotten worse at catching them. But we got, anyway, it is what it is. Okay, so hope all that makes sense. We'll come back on Wednesday. I'll have a lecture for you. I will mention one last thing. Very last thing. So all of these lectures that we do, I'm going to go back to a prior prior course, prior semester. Okay, so for all these lectures, I post up little documents called the notes. They're the lecture notes. It's a short one-page summary of all the stuff in the lecture. And the idea for how people should go to lectures, read the notes before the lecture so you have some idea of what it's all going to be about. It's written by me and I hope it all makes sense. I tried to, keep it kind of low tech, low jargon. Read that before the lecture so you can follow along easier with the lecture. During the lecture, attention, write a few notes here and there. Obviously, I recommend pre-printing the slides or, using your laptop and having the slides out, doing that. If you get a little backlogged with the note taking, because people say that, the lectures are recorded, right? So go back and look at the recording at some point. I'm always baffled when people say, the professor covered stuff too fast and I didn't have time to write all the notes I wanted to write. I mean, the lectures are recorded. That's why we record them. Anyway, and then afterward, go back through the slides and review the stuff in your own head and try to make sure that it all makes sense, right? There's enough material here and it's complicated enough that it is going to take that kind of multi-step approach to try to reinforce what all you're doing, okay? All I can tell you beyond that is that the students who show up for lectures and they listen to I try to put stuff in terms of narratives and stories that make things make sense and make it easier to remember because you have some kind of context instead of just a bunch of disjointed facts. I try to set it up that way to help people understand it, and hopefully you'll remember this stuff, or at least a big chunk of it after the course is over. Because again, if you don't, then I don't even know what we're doing here. Okay? So lecture notes, maybe print out slides or have the file available on your machine, whatever, show up for the lecture, and then afterwards go through it again and figure out if there's anything that doesn't make sense. Okay? You go through and do all that, you'll probably be fine on the exams, even though the exams are challenging. All right, that's all I got. So I will see you all Wednesday, and it's been a hoot. All right.